Hello, welcome to the show tonight. There we are. This is Environmental Issues, North Shore Wetlands, The Last Stand. And I have an interesting show tonight, very informational, very powerful, very important. And I have a few people up at the forum here and also in the audience that will be speaking about the wetlands situation and what's going on here on Staten Island, which is very important. So I would like to introduce myself as Pat Brady, and to my far right we have Tony Rose. There he is. Hi, Tony.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Okay, Tony. And then we have Saul Porter. Hi, Saul.
Hello, Pat. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, swinging over to my left. We have Mark Blazejeski.
Hi, Pat.
Wow, I finally got it right. Hi, Mark.
You did.
Okay, Mark, welcome back. And Kathy Romanelli, welcome back.
Thank you, Pat. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so we're going to start. We have a lot of information. We have a lot of video, or actually photos, of the site that's projected in the North Shore. And I'm going to start the show off with Tony Rose, because he does have a presentation here, and he's going to get us acclimated into this situation.
Cool. Thank you. Before I start, let me tell you viewers, go get a pencil and paper. Get a pencil and paper, because we're going to open with a little show and tell, and I'm going to give you homework and your summer reading list. Okay? Or you can grab your remote and tape the show. That'd be a good idea, right? Tape the show, show your friends, show your neighbors. And then later you can get the information. All right, if you're ready to write. As a primer to the whole environmental thing in New York Harbor, if you're a historian or you're just into the harbor, there's some really excellent books. I'd open up with The Big Oyster. This is a history on a half shell. This is a story from when Henry Hudson came into the harbor and passed these huge middens, which are mounds of oyster shells on Staten Island, and then the history of the harbor told through the eyes of the oyster, because New York City has a long, storied history of oysters. Princess Bay, one of the stories about the name is that the Prince of Norway would only eat oysters harvested in Raritan Bay. Oysters, when they first arrived, were the size of dinner plates. And Mark Kurlansky, he's also got books, Cod, about codfish. They said early in our history, you could walk from England to the New World on the back of codfish. There were so many cod. And now cod is, again, another endangered animal. Gotham Unbound. This is, I was recently at a presentation. Ted Steinberg did a presentation, and while he was talking, I went and bought the book. This is the same thing. It goes from colonial era New York all the way up until like 2012. And talks about the environmental issues, how things have changed. These books are out of print. The first two books are out of print, but you can get them on eBay. You can buy them on Amazon. I bought both of these for $5 on eBay, free shipping. Get them.
Are they in the library also? Or?
I don't know. These actually, you can see.
Just say the name of the two books again.
The Big Oyster. This is a very light, he's a really good storyteller. And it goes through the history. If you went to Coney Island in 1901, you didn't get a hot dog. There were carts with alcohol lamps, and you got a dish of oyster chowder, or you got a half dozen oysters on a half shell. This is a more scholarly, it's a good read. It's an easy read, Gotham Unbound. And they are available, they are cheap. You want to get your kids started, there's always the one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. Stories doesn't carry as well as the title, but it gets your kids started.
And what's the title of that one?
This is Dr. Seuss. One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish.
What ages is that for?
Well, you can, my grandson's 2, and we're reading it to him.
Okay.
I never miss the opportunity to buy a book for a little kid. You know, oh, can I have toys? I'll say no, but I'll never say no to a book. My daughter is a marine biology professor, University of Tampa.
Wow,
And
nice. There it
got to
is.
start somewhere.
Okay.
Now, this book is a little tougher. The Staten Island Protectors of the Pine Oak Woods commissioned The Secret Places of Staten Island. And it's a smaller audience. It is just an excellent book. If you want to get into the local ecology, you want to see neat places on Staten Island, this is the book to get. Again, out of print, this is pretty pricey. I've seen this anywhere from $35 to $95 on eBay. I have some people from the Protectors looking in their basements to see if they have any cases left. And they might, and then you could get them certainly very reasonable. It's a very good book. It's one of those books you get and you keep. The Big Oyster, when I buy 2 or 3 of them at a time, and I give them to people. And I say, the only proviso, this is yours, I don't want it back. The only proviso is, after you read it, pass it on. Give it to somebody so that we can spread the gospel.
I just have a question
Sure,
before you
shoot.
start your presentation. How did you get started in this?
Sunday night when
Yeah.
I was a teenager, before there was Nat Geo, before there was the internet, before every Sunday at 7 p.m. we're laying on a belly in front of the TV watching The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. And I was going to be the next Jacques Cousteau, but then, life gets in the way. So but life goes full circle. I became a nurse, I'm a teacher, and now we're running programs and I'm teaching little kids.
Okay.
So
We're starting
we
with
have
the
a presentation. We have a presentation to frame the whole issue of what's going on in the Graniteville swamp.
Okay, now we're talking about Staten Island.
Right, and
North
there's a map.
Shore.
I'm going to do maps.
Okay.
There's maps in here. This
Okay.
is a standalone program.
Okay.
If people are watching your show, they probably know that New York Harbor is an estuary. All right? The estuary is where the salt water meets the fresh water. And it becomes a rich, and that's what it says in those books. New York Harbor is a nursery for the North Atlantic. A lot of fish are born here. In Richmond Town, there's Richmond Creek, silver eels. The American eel is born in they come in and they spawn like salmon go up river. They go to Richmond Town and they spawn in Richmond Creek. And then the eels go back out to the middle of the Atlantic to the Sargasso Sea as juveniles. Then when they come back as 2-year-old, 3-year-old, they come back and they spawn. All right?
Is that we're just waiting for the presentation there.
We'll vamp.
But is that something that people eat, these eels, or is that a prey?
Mostly what's happening now, people mostly use them as bait. When they want to go for bluefish, when they go for
Oh, I
big
see.
fish,
Okay.
they'll buy, because you can go to a bait shop and buy eels.
Okay, I think we're
Okay,
set.
so we're ready to rock and roll. All right, so the question on the floor today is save the Graniteville Forest. The harbor, we said, is an estuary, and it's fed by a lot of rivers. It's fed by the Hackensack, the Passaic, certainly the Hudson River, the Raritan and the Rahway rivers, and there's also another river people don't think about. There are 2 huge pipes from the Catskills, and they pour water into the city. Every New Yorker uses between 80 and 90 gallons a day of water. That water then goes through the sewer system and into the bay and out to the sea. Did we lose the presentation?
Next? No?
No,
It's gone?
the presentation's up. That's under the presentation.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, I'm ready. I'll vamp until. So Graniteville is a natural drainage area. It's 30 acres. That's been recognized for a long time as a very important,
Okay.
as a very important area. It's
Okay, this is it?
it's trees. Well, this is some pictures. There's it's 30 acres.
Okay,
We're up?
30
Okay.
acres.
30 acres. 12 of it is saltwater marsh.
Now, where is this? We're
Now, this
talking-
is on the northwest corner of Staten Island, South Avenue and Forest Avenue. I'm going to show you a map, and
Okay.
we'll locate everybody.
Okay.
There's 12 acres of saltwater marsh, and then 18 acres of upland forest, okay? And they're two integral components. They feed each other. The Graniteville has streams. Now, Debbie Rose has said, we're not building in a wetland. This isn't a wetland. Look at your screen real close. That's not a wetland, okay? Yeah, this is not a wetland. It's been identified as a significant natural area by all sorts of people. It drains the neighborhood, it feeds the harbor, there's trees, there's wildlife, and it's a functional portion of the estuary, and it's definitely in need of protection. All right, Lance Rehad took some of these pictures. I've got some of these
Lance
pictures.
Filmmaker,
We should give credit where credit is due.
absolutely.
Now, the reason they say it's not a wetland is that New York State didn't have wetland protection for a long time. People bought property, and then the State Department of Environmental Conservation went around and said, we need to look at these places. There are places that really shouldn't be built in. There are places that are natural drainage areas, and we need to protect them. 75–80% of the wetland marshes that were here when Henry Hudson strolled in are gone. New York, Manhattan had significant wetlands and marshes, gone. We'll see on the map later what happened to Staten Island. So here's Staten Island, and certainly what we're talking about is there in the northwest corner. If we could zoom in from outer space a little bit, there's our location. You can see Forest Avenue to the north, the service road to the south, and there's the Staten Island Expressway. South Avenue runs along from the bottom of the screen to the top right around through the middle. All right, and this is the area we're talking about. This is, there's a wedge, and you can see on your left, the point of the wedge, there is New York City Parks Department property, Graniteville Swamp Park. And there's a piece of private property with old wrecked cars fenced in that intrudes through the middle of it, but there's a park's presence. All the way to the right, along South Avenue, to locate this in between Lowe's and Home Depot, up on the North Shore along Forest Avenue. Harbor Freight is on the corner of South Avenue. There's a car wash opposite Harbor Freight. Opposite the car wash is United Cerebral Palsy has a workshop. You can see that little indentation in the top right corner. And there's some auto parts places and mechanics. And then 18 acres of trees. It says the construction area. Down underneath is the protected marsh. So this was all protected wetland. Engineers, hydrologists, biologists said this is wetland, okay? After he bought it for $600,000, and now he went nuts. A lot of people all over the state went nuts. When the property they owned, our property rights are being taken away, the state set up a Wetlands Appeal Board. And in a very Solomonic fashion, the Wetlands Appeal Board said, okay, we're gonna cut the baby in half. Down below, the protected marsh is saltwater, wetland, you can't build there, but the forest, the woods are no longer wetland. Now, if you walk through it, you'll see it's wetland. You've seen the pictures. It's clearly wetland. And it was noted by the Harbor Estuary Program, by the New York State DEC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Natural Resources Group of the Parks Department, the Trust for Public Land, have all said this is an area that's in need of protection. All right. The problem is, there are a lot of places on Staten Island that have been in need of protection. We've been pretty lucky. Jones Wood, this is from Heritage Park. Ellen Pratt from the Protectors helped mobilize crowd on the North Shore. The North Shore Waterfront Conservancy started based at the Blissenbach Marina, which has now become Heritage Park. Jones Woods, Goodyear Woods, Pouch Camp, St. Francis Woods, Mount Loretto, all of these places have been saved. And everybody said, there's a very discrete stream of money, we can only do so much with it. And don't worry about Graniteville because Graniteville's a wetland, so it's safe. Turns out it's not. Now the forest has been said, not by engineers, not by scientists, but by lawyers, that forest is no longer wetland. So our friend wants to build a huge mega mall. He's going to take down 18 acres of trees. 1,800 trees are at risk. And put a BJ's, a restaurant, supermarket, gas station, and We're a little frightened. This is the last forest on Forest Avenue. Why don't we just change the name to Asphalt Boulevard, all right, if we're going to take the forest away? So we've been pretty good, and sometimes not so much, all right? Mount Manresa went down the pipes. A couple other places we've lost, but there's a commonality. There's an understanding. Some of the places that we've saved were saved because the owners of the property didn't really want them developed. Places like Goodhue Woods. Goodhue, the Catholic Charities, has a center with a day camp, with a pool, basketball courts.
We all went there.
And they want, my kids learned how to swim there. They wanted to keep the woods so they could do day hikes, grab leaves, and do arts and crafts with it. But what they said is, we need the money. We need money. So we're going to sell this to developers, knowing that the community would rise up, grab their elected officials, and say, no, we have to get money. We have to save this. We can't let this go to developers. So now Catholic Charities keeps their center, gets to use the park, and the money. The same thing happened with the Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts had to spend a lot of money lately. They used to have 2 floors in the Empire State Building. They've congealed now, condensed into part of 1 floor. They've had to spend a lot of money on public relations, a lot of money on lawyers. So they need the money. They said, well, we're going to sell Pouch Camp.
No.
We're going to give it to developers. We'll punch a couple of roads in it, and you can put 25 McMansions in that area. Again, the community said, you can't do that. You can't do that. We slept there as little kids. We want to be able to drive by and see the woods. So $15 million later, they put a conservation easement into the deed. They could sell it, but in perpetuity, you cannot develop, you cannot build on Pouch Camp. And part of the agreement was that the community now is able to use that, certainly within reason, with the consent of the Boy Scouts, but we can go into Pouch Camp. You could camp there, okay? The St. Francis Friars, same story. Now, Mount Manresa, the problem with the Mount Manresa was the Jesuits wanted to just get out of town. They didn't want to keep the property. They wanted to take their bags of money and get out of Dodge. So they made a quiet deal, and before anybody heard about it, it was too late.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, they came back.
there
to
we go.
us.
Okay, let me wrap. So how can we develop a strategy? How can we develop a more consistent, a winning strategy? We can't rely on the good faith of the owners. It's not going to happen. And the city process has already passed. The Universal Land Use Review process approved it. The City Council voted 50-1. We're at our Alamo stand. The last stop now is that they need to get a permit from the state DEC to build. Our contention is that the city process was flawed, and we don't think that the developer can rise to the level of protection of its neighbor, the marshland. So we've been fighting to keep the place alive, to keep the process going. What he's done now is gone in and bulldozed roads. They can't build, but they can do preliminary work. They've built roads, they've cut down trees, they can do test borings. And they went and they got the biggest, oldest, nicest trees, took them down. You could see they brought a bulldozer in and, like an old Dodge commercial, did donuts and took down huge numbers of trees. We had engineers from their lumbering. They're harvesting the forest. We had engineers from the city DEC come, the Blue Belt people, who said, we're a little far behind. Our time frame is years. You already have contractors taking down trees. But any engineer who put a shovel in the ground would tell you, this is a wetland. So what can we do? How can you help? You got your pen and paper. SICWF.org. What happened after Mount Manresa, we realized that individually, the individual groups don't have a lot of clout. If we could set up a coalition of all the different groups, we have more effect, we have more power. So that's what's happened. Go to SICWF.org. There's some history, there's some background on it. Our stand now is they're going to have to apply for a permit, and there'll be a comment period. We need to write letters to the governor. Write a letter to the governor, and it's easy. Google, contact Governor Cuomo, and a screen will come up. You type your information and you type your message and tell him that we need to protect that land. We're not against, we have to tell you, we're not against BJ's. We're not against cheap prices. We're not against food options for Mariners Harbor. Mariners Harbor is an environmental justice community that's got everything except that so far.
Exactly.
We'd like that to happen, but why do we need to cut down 18-acre forest to put another gas station in? All right? So you can go GoFundMe. We need some money. I just bought a $50 remote. That's on me. That's on me. But certainly, people are printing pictures. We're using toners. Someone stripped the sheets off their bed to make a sign. We need to put the sheet back on the bed. You know, we need to be civilized. So there's a GoFundMe, $25. Breakdown. We Flyer. The coalition is at the corner of South Avenue and Forest Avenue. All right, between Forest and Amador, every Saturday from 11 till 1. Turn up, find out what's going on, hand some flyers out. We have people going into Jersey to boycott BJ's. Charlie Olson is the environmental TV. Charlie Olson's trying to get people who are engaged, who are interested, want to be part of the environmental movement to help make an environmental TV channel. You can go to theenvironmenttv.com and there's a link and you can find out information about it. This is the crowd Saturday mornings. Charlie's put up the video because after we're finished and done, it doesn't just disappear into space. You can go to YouTube, Google Graniteville, find out all kinds of stuff. Jim Scarcella did an interview talking about the importance of the wetlands. So we need everybody. You have your list. You're going to get your books. Okay, you got your reading assignment. SIProtectors.org is the Staten Island Protectors of the Pine Oak Woods. I'm also on the board of the NRPA, the Natural Resources Protective Association. These are all groups who have joined together with the coalition. Some of the other crowd, you know, the Staten Island crowd, we all wear a lot of hats. We're a very incestuous bunch. And everybody knows everybody else on Staten Island. It's a very, very special place. In the other boroughs, there's a Midwood crowd, and they don't talk to the people from Flushing. But here at Staten Island, we all go to each other's tables. We all hang out. And as we go around, people will tell you what other organizations they belong to. It's just, it's an incredible fight, and we are at our Alamo stand.
All
We
right,
need
come on.
everybody watching the show.
Come on back to us. Come on
Okay,
back.
cool, thank you.
Okay. Woo, that was a lot of information there.
In a tiny little
Taking a
package.
deep breath.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to just break it up a little bit. Saul Porter, tell me a little bit about yourself. First of all, are you in school?
Yes, I am. I would be in trouble if I wasn't.
Oh, okay. All righty. What school do you go to? Or college?
I go to St. John's University.
St. John's. All right. And what area do you live in?
I live in Port Richmond, so I'm kind of a hop skipping away from where the swamp is.
All right. So now, what got you interested in this organization? Why fight this? Tell me about it.
I originally heard about the coalition from John Kilcullen, works for Parks and the board member of the Preservation League. And he suggested that a few of us from the Preservation League sit on this board to join together with other groups who are trying to preserve, while not houses, but still the natural landscape of Staten Island. And it's been quite a bit of a love relationship ever since.
Okay. So you like preserving, you like the environment, you think it's important?
Yes, I like being able to breathe clean air.
That's important. Okay. Are you studying any of these environmental subjects in school?
I am getting a bit of a dose of environmental history, trying to brush up on the movement. And I mean, we need to know what happened before so that we know how to fight this going forward, because unfortunately...
Uh-oh, the book
It's
is
yours.
being passed
It's
to
yours.
you.
Oh, good. Summer reading.
There you
It's
go.
yours, little summer reading.
All right.
You know the deal, just pass it on to somebody else when you're done.
Yeah, I got to pay it forward.
Okay, so there's knowledge right there.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else you want to add?
I believe that's about it. I got to get to reading.
Oh, he's got to get to reading. Well, wait till the show ends. Okay.
We may
Well,
need you.
We're going to come back to you. I'm going to swing over. There's Kathy and Mark. You're with the Graniteville Quarry and the Mariners Harbor Civic Association. Tell us a little bit about maybe the Graniteville Quarry and then this I don't know, this
Coalition.
this
issue.
cause. What got you started and what What's important about it?
Well, Mariners Harbor is the closest community to where this development is going to expand into our backyards. And we got involved. I'm the president of the Mariners Harbor Civic Association. We found out about BJ's in 2016, and we started learning and reading and going to meetings with the councilwoman, and we said, this is not good for our community. It's bad. And the people that live directly across from BJ's on South Avenue had no clue, because the developer is not required to notify anybody. So we found out that most of the people that live in Mariners Harbor had no idea what was going to happen to their environment, had no idea that there's going to be 1,200 parking spots across where this beautiful view has been.
I'll hold it up
All right,
so this way they can go in on it.
This is the view that we've looked at for as long as we've lived on Staten Island. That's going to be gone. It's going to be asphalt. It's going to be 1,200 parking spots. It's going to be a BJ's, and we don't want that. We said we could drive 3.5 miles over the bridge and go to BJ's in Linden. We have a Costco on Staten Island. We have the mall. We don't need any of this. But the New York City Council, they just wrote it off, wrote our opinions off. We went to so many meetings. We took a petition up between all our members. Every person was assigned a street. We got thousands of signatures. Nobody cared. So this is our last stand. We want to contact Governor Cuomo. We're having a letter writing campaign that we were just donated by Royal Press. They donated all of 1,000 letters that we are going to send to everybody, and we're going to send them to Governor Cuomo and say, we don't want this. Please help our environment. We cannot live with this atrocity that's going to destroy wetlands, that's going to destroy 1,800 trees. We live close to Linden, where all the gas pollutions. We have the airport, that's high pollutants. These trees are helping us to breathe, and they're all going to be gone, and they're going to put little 3-foot saplings up. It's not fair. And this isn't, our community doesn't want it, and nobody is helping us, nobody.
So you showed the picture of this. This is before. Before. And then I want to show the audience what it's looking like now.
Horrendous.
Okay, let's get one shot in there, and then we're going to get this shot over here.
Now you see a mountain.
Here, I'll bring it over. I'll bring it over here.
Of destroyed trees, and it's even higher than that.
The heavy equipment's already in place, and they're mulching wholesale, so there's a lot of wood coming down already. If you drive by, if you go to the movie theater, and you go by on a summer night and you have the window down, you hear the frogs, and it's a tremendous noise coming out of the swamp. That you understand that there's wildlife actually in there that's beneficial to the environment and to all of us. So it's something that, on a very real basis, you go out and there's not too many frogs around anymore, it seems, and and they're so integral to keeping your mosquito populations in check and as part of the food chain for the other animals that live there. There's a tremendous amount of wildlife. And
well, that's another point. All of a sudden, we're seeing animals being slaughtered.
What does that mean?
Deer.
What do you mean? Just getting hit by the cars? Or?
Yes, they have no place to go. Their habitat has been destroyed. Even this tiny bit of trees that have been cut down, the animals have no place to go. We saw deer hit, raccoons, possums, opossums, the baby skunks, because they're all being born now, and they're just slaughtered. And the city has no plan. We called 311, no, not us. We called 911, no, not us. Well, who is going to help these defenseless, innocent creatures that are being run out of their habitat and into our backyards?
Animal control, which is responsible for animals,
is in Brooklyn.
Is in Brooklyn. So.
And this
I
is
guess they have-
25 acres that's going to be, wiped clean to build this BJ's retail development. And where are these animals that have lived there for hundreds of years?
There's
where are they going to go?
Raccoons, there's skunks.
Nobody thought about
there's
that.
Bats.
Nobody.
There's deer. There's quite a variety of animals that live there. And those are just the mammals. When you
So
get
now
down to
they're
the
all moving-
salamanders and the snakes and the frogs and the toads.
Groundhogs.
And,
We see-
so there's a tremendous amount of diversity within
They're
that
all moving
small
into our
area.
community now.
And because of the great quality of the water that's there and the shelter that they have, granted, most empty lots in Staten Island become an eyesore over time because people use them as dumping grounds. And if you go to the movie theater and you look along that side road there, you'll see that there are some midnight dumping going on there that's an embarrassment to everyone.
When you say Brooklyn Animal Control, what would they do if they could do something? Or what are they supposed to do?
In at least one case, having someone available to humanely put down the animals that have been injured. The animals are being squeezed out, the heavy equipment, the racket that it makes. These animals are used to like living in the woods where it's kind of quiet and maybe, the passing highway noises are all that they hear. But now when you have the first-hand exposure to the mulchers and the bulldozers
And their trees are going, their
and
ponds are
the
going.
trees being cut down all around them, those animals are being pushed out and they're being pushed to where they don't belong. They're being pushed into neighborhoods. So like the local condo association has complaints about skunks that are suddenly there, where they never had them before. The skunks have lived here forever, but they've
Now they're in our
never
backyard.
seen them because they were always protected. You might get a whiff of one going down the street now and then, but you never see them up close. And now the skunks are being forced out, and deer are being hit on South Avenue. So when you think about all these things that are happening, it's it just bodes poorly for the whole area that we have such disregard for nature.
The other issue, Pat, too, is
Yeah.
not where will the animals go, but where will the water go?
Plenty of it.
All of those buildings on the other side of South Avenue. My uncle had a house on Forest Avenue, and 40 years ago, it was all woods. It was all wetland. So they've been, the streams have had conduits put in. They're in little concrete pipes, and now they drain into the wetland. There's underground streams that drain into the wetland. When that area is compacted and filled, where will those natural streams empty to?
Sounds like a
That's the issue.
disaster.
Is one of the issues is, we all love trees. Everybody on this table loves trees. We love animals, and I'm sure everybody at home loves trees, loves animals. But you also like your house. You also like your basement. There's issues about water. Where is the water gonna go? Water goes into this wetland, and you saw from the pictures. You saw the water. The water drains into that area, goes into the creek, and into the Arthur Kill.
It's like Mountain and Risa. It was a natural area, and now it's all bulldozed, gone. Where does that water go? People complain on Fingerboard Road that the water's toppling over. There's mudslides. There are no more animals.
There's
in the
how many
birds.
houses? 400, 500 houses in the developments.
That's
There's
the sin,
1,200
yeah.
homes there
And there's-
that will be directly affected if we become a flood zone, which is quite possible. It's quite possible that this whole area will be termed, they'll be required to have flood insurance.
This area drains into the Port Richmond sewage system. Most of Staten Island didn't have sewers for the longest time. So now, most of Staten Island, the newer sewers that went in the last couple of years, have a separate sanitary and a separate storm system. The North Shore, being an older, established area, has a combined sewage overflow, which means your poop sewer and your storm sewer are the same pipe.
8 inches
And-
wide.
When you could rain lightly days and days and days, and it won't matter. But a heavy storm like we had last weekend, the water overflows and goes directly out into the ocean.
is
If
your
it
sewage.
overflows, if the pipe can't handle it,
goes in
it's
your
going to back up into the neighborhoods.
Yeah,
And look at the storm on the South Shore. Areas that are prone to flooding had 2-3 feet of water. Cars were dead in the streets. And Mariners Harbor is a former wetland.
It affects everybody. It affects life. It affects the environment, what we live, where we live. Very important. Okay, I'm going to swing over. There's a few people in the audience that want to say a few words. You can come on up and talk about the importance.
Now, let me just say while we're waiting for that.
Okay, sure.
The Amazon warehouse out on Gulf Avenue.
Gulfport.
Did they build that, or?
Oh
are
yeah,
they-
it's well under construction, and it's going to be huge. And what they've done there, this is the old GATX refinery area that was left fallow after they pulled out of there. They've actually elevated the ground for the warehouses, so they've changed the topography of the area. So this impacts the entire area when you consider the flood elevations that are now being redefined because of Hurricane Sandy. So when you look at all these, what used to be lower areas where the water would run off or
Yeah.
be absorbed in, now it's being repelled off, and so there's more water coming off of the areas that are elevated. So without anywhere for it to go, the marshlands are even more important because they act as a sponge to absorb all this water as it's transported out finally to the Kilvan Col.
On the South Shore, the Blue Belt has been a tremendous, tremendous success. What they found is that natural drainage areas can serve the neighborhood better than anything that man can build. So take a natural drainage area, make it a sanctuary, and let it just do what it's supposed to do.
That's more valuable than a retail development center.
And you could put the retail development center somewhere else. We don't have to cut down 2,000 trees and
Exactly.
impact the natural drainage.
Okay,
Please
we're
help us.
we're going to pray for help. Okay, we have somebody, Jack Bolembach. Come on up, Jack, and let's hear what's going on with you and the cause.
Well, first I want to say it's a great panel, excellent information.
Talking to the mic.
Excellent
Right,
information
right,
here,
right.
great panel. And
Thank you.
everybody's going to learn a lot. And you covered a lot of territory from the animals to the wetlands to the flooding issues. And I'd just like to reiterate that with the problems that we have with Graniteville, it's pretty indicative to Staten Island how a lot of the land has been destroyed and gone. We're depending on a sewage system that's antiquated. And during heavy storms, as Tony said, a lot of this wastewater gets brought into the Arthur Kilvan Col, and it pollutes the environment. But the main concern here at Graniteville is that it was really not diagnosed well. They didn't evaluate the problem, the aftermath of what's going to happen when they build the BJs. They're building the parking lot 7 feet above the natural level. Where's the water going to go? It's going to go into the community if we get another Sandy. And the court decision was in August of 2012, which means that Sandy hit October 2012. So the effect of a storm of the magnitude of Sandy wasn't calculated into the court decision. That's one very important thing. Also, from the pictures that we saw, you could see that the vernal ponds, those are ponds that only exist in the springtime. A lot of animals, such as the frogs, the peepers, depend on those ponds. They spawn, and what they do, these little frogs, when the ponds dry up, they now survive in the woodlands. Those woodlands will be gone where the cinema complex is. That's all going to be paved over, and it's going to be a store. So even if they left the pond there, or the remnants of the pond in the summer, if they leave that there, where are these frogs going to go? They can't survive on concrete. So you disrupted the ecosystem. That entire 28 acres should have been saved. It's one environment, and that's what you see on the South Shore of Staten Island. The Blue Belt project from the DEP was an excellent plan. They saved numerous acres. It's wetlands and woodlands together. And as Tony spoke about the eels, if those woodlands and streams, the environment wasn't all one, where would those eels be? They're part of the integral part of the ecosystem. And the same way on Graniteville. Everything should have been saved, but it's not. And we have that. We're going to face reality of a BJ's, and if it doesn't survive, you end up with this huge box store. That's just going to be a dinosaur. And if you look at last Sunday's Advance, Woolney gave a excellent article about the peepers and about how they survive on the woodlands. If these woodlands are gone, they're not going to survive in that particular area. So one thing in the environment, one incident affects something else, which affects something else. Yeah. And then I'd just like to end this with the NRPA that Tony belongs to. We did a number of cleanups. And we did a great cleanup in January. A lot of volunteers came. A young girl she was visiting Manhattan. She's from Japan. She saw the cleanup was going to take place. She took a subway to the Verrazano Bridge, took the bus across the Verrazano Bridge, had no way to get to Graniteville. So what did she do? She took a cab, paid 20 bucks, whatever it was. So I drove her to the ferry. I insisted on giving her the $20. She wouldn't take it. She was just so happy to come here to be involved in environmental cleanup. Yet, a couple of weeks later, people from Staten Island went and illegally dumped all around the Graniteville area, around the cinema complex. So it shows you there are people out there that do care about the environment. But here on Staten Island, a lot of people just litter, throw garbage around. A lot of people don't care. So we're fighting an uphill battle, and I think what we're trying to do here is just alert the public to educate people. And really, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you,
and
Jack.
Great panel.
Jack, thank
Very
you.
good. You know, Jack is a pioneer activist. He wants things right. He wants the environment to stay right. But of course, progress goes on, and we just want the people to be aware of what's going on.
Most of them don't know. Most of them have no idea, and it's really sad.
And then you find people also, they live on the other side of the island. Okay, it's them. But look, if this happens, it could happen over there too.
And it affects the whole island.
Absolutely.
It really does.
And we're having 100-year storms every 5 years.
Could happen, yep.
When that store gets flooded, they come asking for tax money to make them whole after they've been flooded, after we told them, don't go there. That's your money. That's your money. That's everybody's
And there's
money.
plenty of old sites that have existing decrepit buildings on them already. You know, when you look at a natural area where, you know, it's somewhat virginal in that it's been left alone for a good long time, even though it may have been industrial at one time, just like the GATX site.
And Mariners Marsh.
Yeah.
Mariners Marsh is going to be a beautiful place once
Right.
it's cleaned up.
But now it's a big wide open area. Now there's plenty of other places that they could put things like this.
And
you
now
know,
Just a Procter and Gamble, just a little ways
a
up the
good
road.
example. There's lots of old buildings that if you just swap out like for like, that's not such a bad thing. It's not changing the environment worse off than it is now. We have a good example would be the Harbor Freight Tools. Took over what used to be Western Beef, and that used to be a bowling alley. So here was a building that was already in place that found two different usages, and then the third party tore it down and built something new, which is great. That's urban development. That's actually improving the area. It's getting rid of run down and maybe a bit of an eyesore type of building and replacing with something new. Nothing wrong with that. All for development. But the fact is, when you do have these old stand trees and
Wetlands.
natural wetlands and
Vernal ponds.
and places that need to be saved, there's so many other places where development can happen.
Thoughtful development.
Right.
We're not against development.
No.
We're not
What
against
happened to
the
city
BJs.
planning? What happened to our elected leadership, like looking at things with an eye toward preservation and not just for the quick tax buck that this is going to make?
And the city council held a hearing last week talking about the city's efforts on resiliency and recovery.
Who said that?
And
Well, you
the
know,
city
we're-
council.
Well, you know, we're not a part of the city, or
This
at
is
least they
okay.
don't act
Wait,
Wait
like
a
it.
second,
interested
tell
in.
us a little bit about that. Do you know about that city council? Have you read or have you been involved with that? Have seen it?
I wasn't there personally, but at least from what Gabriella, who is the
Gabriella,
chairperson of the coalition, but she attended that meeting, and it was a meeting with the city's Committee on the Environment, where she met with a few of the agencies there to let them know about what was going on in Graniteville. And there were quite a few of them who were receptive to what was going on here and our efforts. But we've also just encountered as well, just a lot of the time, that people in the city agencies can be abrasive to our efforts, to put it lightly. And it's understandable. Staten Island is the last frontier of development. We've got more open land, I dare say, than any other borough, and our open land is cheap. It's marshes, it's wetland, it's the kind of stuff that you can buy for less than $1 million and turn around for several tens of millions of dollars. So it's an attractive place to come and buy land and build, but when people build on this land, it drives down our property values. It increases the already high levels of sickness that we have in regards to asthma, and it just makes this place a much more difficult borough to live in.
And the quality of life issues as well. More traffic, more congestion, more air pollution.
I mean, our roads haven't been updated in years. We're running on a grid system that's
Our
God, hundreds of
streets
years old.
were game trails. All of the streets in Staten Island at one point were game trails. Then the Indians made them footpaths. Native Americans
Yes, Native American.
made them
Lenape.
footpaths.
What about the street
Colonists
Tony?
made them mud roads. All of our streets. That's why we have no organized grid system. These are the same streets that were trails for the Lenape Indians 200-300 years ago.
Okay.
And none of our streets are. Richmond Avenue is the only one that has a concrete foundation and asphalt. All of our other streets is why we all have potholes so much, because it's simply flattened dirt and asphalt put on top of it.
I'm going to take a deep breath. We're all taking a deep breath. Art Siegel, he's a filmmaker here on Staten Island. Hi, Art. How are you?
How are you folks?
Okay,
Thanks
we're
a lot
good.
for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're all currently, and rightly so, concerned with the 28 acres of swamp forest here in Graniteville, but unfortunately, that might be the tip of the iceberg as far as our preservation problems are concerned, because we've got 2,600 acres altogether bordering the Arthur Kill River that are very similar to the Graniteville swamp forest. And although they're highly fragmented, the wildlife that frequents these places somehow manages to get across to these various places and share them. So I'm very concerned because of these 2,600 acres of swamp forest, tidal wetlands, mudflats, and various other ecological systems related to them, that only about 29% of these 2,600 acres are now protected in some fashion. That doesn't mean they're protected in perpetuity, but in some fashion they are protected. So while these 28 acres are in danger currently, we may have much bigger problems to follow. So everybody should be aware of that. And if they want to read more about these 2,600 acres, they could read about them in a book called An Island in Nature, which, oh wow, Tony Rose has the book. He might hold it up. Fantastic. That's great. That's the book.
Right.
And this book was written by the Trust for Public Land and the New York City Audubon Society. The New York City Audubon Society was established a branch here in New York City around 1990. And immediately they got very interested in the harbor herons, the various kinds of herons that are coming back to this area in places like Shooter's Island, the Isle of Meadows, and so forth. So they wrote this book, and in the course of writing the book, they give a very detailed description of the various parcels and that total up to 2,600 acres. As I say, they are fragmented, but there are detailed descriptions of them and locations, and they talk about the natural services that they perform. Absorbing the floodwaters is one of the major natural services that they provide, as well as nurseries for the propagation of fish and shellfish and so forth. But I had a question, so I hope people buy the book. It's out of print now. It's not available. It's not very easy to get, but you can look on Amazon and see if you get lucky, and you could buy the book there. So it's still available. But I had a question here. I have a list of possible relevant parties to the court decision of 2012 concerning the final environmental impact statement allowing the development of this current project on 18 acres of the 28-acre parcel we're talking about. I'd like to know who actually participated in the court proceedings, either as litigants or friends of the court, and what role did each play in the court proceedings, and what did each recommend when they heard the facts and the situation and the issues, environmental issues related to this development. And how did the court justify its final disposition? And so here's a list of them. New York City DEC, the New York City DEP, New York City Planning Department, elected officials, including New York City Council, New York City Assembly people, New York State Assembly, the New York State Senate, former Borough President James Molinaro, U.S. Corps of Engineers, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the same civil societies who wrote that book that I just talked about, An Island in Nature, including the Audubon Society, the New York City chapter, and the Trust for Public Land, who, in partnership with each other, wrote that book about the Harbor Heron, the so-called Harbor Heron Project. So I would love to see a transcript of that those court proceedings, so that we can learn just what the arguments were. But anyway, I have some bad
transcript.
news that I'm not going to share with you. About my conversation with a certain Rodney Rivera, who's public relations chargé d'affaires, if I can use that term.
We're French.
And we talked about the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation jurisdiction, and that's where it gets a little tricky with preserving this, because they claim, according to Rodney Rivera, they do not have jurisdiction over 18 of those 28 acres. And the 18 of those 28 acres that we're talking about that they do not have jurisdiction over is the location of this development that we're all concerned about. So, to me, these 28 acres are very, very important, but the recent court decision in 2012 could be a harbinger of things to come. And we're going to have to be very concerned about that. So if anybody thinks the fight is over once this is preserved, we're going to have a lot of other fights, because just to remind people, only 29% are protected in any way, and there are very many levels of protection. I'm sure Tony Rose knows a lot more about that than I do. But there are, because various people own those properties and have determined that so far, or right now, or for the time being, we're going to keep them as they are. We're going to maintain them as they are. So that's my concern. But anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Nice, good question.
Thank you, Art.
The lack of participation by some of these organizations is really a disgrace. When we were doing, I was a proponent of the NASCAR track, which if they had gone ahead with that, they would have preserved a large section of the wetlands and the GATX property. But at that time, the Sierra Club, the Audubon Society, any number of conservation groups came out against it, mostly at the behest of the elected politicians, I'm sure, who didn't want to touch the project because they considered it a hot potato with the obvious political ramifications that they didn't want to deal with. It's always better to be against something, especially something that's somewhat unpopular, rather than being forward-thinking and looking towards something that could possibly be a benefit to the area's economy, at the same time preserving a large section of the environment that's there. So where are these people? Why haven't we heard from any of them? And why? I mean, these very same concerns they had with the wetlands where the NASCAR track are going are exactly the same issues that they should be addressing through this kind of effort.
So what's happening? There's nothing happening right now. So how do we get it to happen? How do they?
It seems to me that it's politically driven.
It could be. All right.
To respond to the last question,
Yeah.
the history of the 2012, Joseph Alpert is the guy who bought the property. bought it at auction, $600,000, and wouldn't talk to the Trust for Public Land or anybody who would try and broker. What the trust tries to do is they have a pot of money that they can use as a turnkey. They can go somewhere. They helped on the Heritage Park. What they did is the owners of property who are willing to turn these over to the Parks Department, this is a process that takes years. So the trust says what we'll do is we'll broker an arrangement, we will front the money. If we know the money's coming from the government, we'll front the money, and so the guy is off the hook, the agreement is made, and when the money comes, we'll take that back and then use it on the next piece of property. So, and this is probably like $10, $15 million for a $600,000 property. He fought, when the Wetlands Appeal Board opened up, he litigated the state for about 5 years. And my understanding is at some point a new commissioner came in and said, we're wasting a lot of time, a lot of money fighting this guy, get it done, make a deal. So they said, okay, so the saltwater marsh can't be touched, but the woods is no longer wetland. So we can't go backwards and impact that. That's a done deal. And the Wetlands Appeal Board has been dissolved since then. Now they just do things regular through the courts. Our last hope is that the state DEC still controls the saltwater marsh, and its neighbor is the forest. So we need, what happens, in order to build, he has to get a building permit from the DEC saying that he will not impact the saltwater wetland. So our job, your job at home is to contact Cuomo, contact Diane Savino, contact your state agencies, write them a letter saying, we don't believe that this proposition is gonna be beneficial.
Won't hold water.
It's not gonna hurt. It's not gonna hurt the wetland. It's gonna flood the neighborhoods, it's gonna cost people money, it might cost people lives.
And lower their property values because they're going to have to pay for all that extra flood insurance.
So, this is our last stand.
Okay.
www.sicwf.org is the Coalition for Wetlands and Forests.
Okay, the time is going by. We need another hour or another show, another follow-up show. But I want everybody just to summarize and just reiterate what we just spoke about. And how has it impacted your life? You're young, so what do you think about this?
Well, let's say that they do get this built. By the time I'm Tony's age, Forest Avenue will probably be backed up till I'm 90. I'll probably die waiting to get
Tony's
through
90?
South Avenue.
Whoa!
There'll probably be enough pollution along that road to give me lung cancer 4 times over. I mean, it's just going to be, in terms of just the pollution in the neighborhood, it's going to make an already terrible situation worse. As was mentioned, it's an environmental justice community. There are already several toxic sites there. And now you're going to put a gas station on top of a wetland while cutting down 2,000 trees. What about this seems like a good idea? I don't know.
Doesn't sound good. Okay, last thoughts.
Well,
Kathy?
Mariners Harbor is under fire here. We do not want this. We do not want trees cut down, animals slaughtered. We need your help. We want people to come and help us get the word out, because when right-minded people like us hear about this, we don't want it. We'll contact Governor Cuomo. We'll contact, elected officials to try and stop it. But the problem is, so many people don't even know about it.
Okay.
So we need your help.
And I'd
Hopefully.
encourage everybody to make it a point. If you go to the movies, or you go to Home Depot, or even to Charlie Brown's for dinner, drive around the whole space and really see what's at stake. It's not just scenic. You'll see animals there. You'll see the waterways, and you'll see the fact that that this is someplace that is rather unique for the area, for sure, and it's a valuable resource that we are doing our best to keep from being ruined.
Okay. We're running out of time, and I want to thank you, Tony. It was a really
Excellent presentation.
great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for the lesson, Mr. Teacher.
Getting the word out. Saul, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
That's the future. We have to get them
Ruin
involved.
Saul's life. Let's
There
do
we
the
go.
right thing.
And Kathy and Mark. And Lance, thank you for the photos. And Eloise Calderwood, thank you for the posters. The crew, Kenneth, and Bernadette. We have the director, Helene. there's other people that don't want to be shown, but.
And Pat.
Yes.
And Pat.
Thank you. And
Oh,
Pat.
I'll give you a
Thank you
bottle.
for having us,
Thank you
Pat.
for having this forum, for caring.
Mike and Charlie, I thank everybody for being here, and let's fight on.
Yes.
Well, it's not over yet.
Get
Thank you,
involved.
Jack, too.
Did we say
Thank you.
www.sicwcf.org?
SICWF.org. Yeah.
There it is, sicwf.org.
Zoom in
There
on
it
that,
is.
would you guys, as we close?
The last
Okay.
hurrah.